Hi everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of the B2B Nav podcast in relation to CGI, visual effects and all things 3D. You'll see we're wearing the same clothes, we haven't left the building. So joined again by Ollie and Paul, who, if you've listened to part 1, is our visual effects and CGI specialist here at B2B. So we'll pick up exactly where we left off, if that's alright with you both, and crack on into the conversation. So in part 1 we spoke a lot about the process, the role it can play in B2B. Now we're going to get into the detail a bit more, I guess, on some of the specific topics. So we talked through the process at length earlier, and we touched on kind of rendering as this kind of end bit of the process, let's call it. And from an agency perspective, there's an awful lot of investment in kit and software that you need to be able to either render, or you put it out to what's called a render farm, effectively. If you haven't got the in-house capabilities to render yourself, what is a render farm, Paul?
A render farm is an online company, or just a company I've worked across from render farms in the past, that they've invested in hundreds of machines, all at different capabilities. They've invested in the software for all of these machines, and you send them their file and they effectively create your images.
Yeah.
Rendering is basically creating of an image. It's like painting the final picture.
Yeah. So when you're in the software, effectively, you can see a version of what you're working on, obviously, but it's not that final version, is it? You can't see how the lighting bounces off everything until you've actually rendered it out.
No. But I think that's an important point as well, because throughout the process, you'll output various renders, won't you, throughout kind of the stage development of, we'll stick with virtual visit for the ease of it, the environments that we're developing. And you can do low quality renders, very high quality renders, but that final render won't really be executed until right at the death, and that's the crisp kind of output. Now, there's obviously a time associated with that, which again for me is a complete unknown until you joined us in the building, of how long these things take to output, because I think everything takes about 2 minutes. Now it doesn't, as it turns out, in rendering. Now you also have to render video and normal motion work, don't you, but not to the same load and I guess, well, the load it puts on the system and in terms of the actual length it takes to do it. So can you talk us through how it works with the frames and the render process?
Yeah, so, excuse me, sorry. The best way to describe it is if I saw something the other day and I'll use it today. So if you think that a 90-minute movie, 90-minute movie
with you
is based up of 90 60-minute seconds. 60 seconds. Sorry.
I'll do some maths for you as we go. So 90-minute movie is effectively
so you've
5,400 seconds.
So you've got, well, the way to, sorry, what I'm trying to explain is that a 90-minute movie is made up of 90 60 seconds.
Yeah.
For each 60 seconds is made up of one second of 24 frames, if that makes sense. So
24 frames per second, yeah.
So 24 frames per second, 60 seconds a minute, 90 minutes.
So a frame is effectively, for anybody that really doesn't know, is basically a still image, and we tie 24 of them together to make 1 second video footage, and you tie 129,600 of them together to make a 90-minute movie.
Yes. So basically, an image. So with an animation, you're creating a lot of still images.
Yeah.
Now, from a motion point of view, these aren't so much broken down, but from a CG point of view, you have to render each individual frame.
And the number of frames per second, the higher the frames per second, the smoother the graphics in a way.
Yes.
Just in terms of, so we see it with cameras, don't we? But all various other aspects of life. But because what would Wallace and Gromit, for those that don't know, sorry, but you have to Google it. But in the sense of, is that like ridiculously?
Well, yeah. So
I know that's different because it's clay modelling.
Yeah, but it's
the same principle, isn't it? That's a Monsters Inc.
But if you think that for Wallace and Gromit, for argument's sake, they move it fraction of a millimetre, take a shot. Yeah. Fraction of a millimetre, take a shot. That's effectively what we're doing.
Yeah. That's how I understood it in my own simple mind when you explained it to me originally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a typical film will have 24, 25 frames per second. I think some things these days are shot at 60 frames per second, but I'm presuming animation they do it at 24.
It depends, because again, it's how smooth you want it to look. It's how much time you've got left in before you've got to deliver as well.
That's a really good point. A really good point.
Because I think that this is one of the points, I don't know about you, but I think it's certainly before Paul started, is that we hadn't really appreciated how much of a time-consuming effort it was to actually output a final render of something.
No, but I think so much of what we do, maybe with the exception of video, as in motion video, once we've done it, we've done it. We deliver that proposal, we deliver that report, we deliver that written piece of work, we deliver that ad, whatever it may be, the media plan. So we don't kind of create it and then have to wait. But it's just so different in what you do, isn't it? Because you can create it all, it's crafted, it's there, but it's not output yet, which can take
a long time.
Days?
It depends.
I found a great stat here, which I think really helps us to bring it to life. So the movie Monsters University required 100 million CPU hours to render that, which is where we need a render farm, because if we didn't have a render farm and you just had one computer rendering that, it would have apparently taken 10,000 years for a single computer to make that film.
Yeah, that's the. So, I mean, I suppose using what you said there, the closest thing that the rendering process is like, it's like baking a cake.
Yeah.
All the ingredients, that's the modelling, the mood boarding, it's all there in the bowl. Once you put it all in, it's all there in the bowl. But it's not a cake, is it? And that's the thing, is the fact you've still got to put it into the oven and wait for it to make the cake, so to speak. And then you've got the post-production or the icing and that sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, the funny thing about the whole Pixar story is that when they rendered Toy Story, it was I'm quoting figures that I'm not 100% certain of, but say it was 11 hours per frame when they first did that. And then you'd think, well, they've got better computers since that. But I think they were saying that on Monsters University, it was close to 18 hours per frame. And that's the thing, is because computers are getting faster and everything as well, people are putting more into them.
But also that's linked again, I guess, from an agency perspective and an investment perspective. If you're seriously thinking about CGI as something you want to offer, and I can totally understand from an agency perspective why quite often it's left as an external, we go to it when we need it resource, because it's the investment in infrastructure and kit, let alone team members and talent, as we say, is so considerable. Plus you've got to appreciate, if you're rendering yourself, it is burning that machine out, so at some point you're going to need another or something else to complement that as well. So it's not an inconsiderable investment to actually even be able to offer this as a service line before you're reaping any fees for it, I guess. So.
And then in terms of actually getting something done by a deadline, that's the other big repercussion, because it's not just let's work a bit harder. That machine has got a limited amount of frames it can render. So if you've got a tight deadline, it really needs to be considered of, do we have enough time for that machine to do it? Is it going to be...
We also know as well, though, don't we, when you're doing timelines with clients, and again, it's just part of building this into the process, and it's, again, something we've learned now, but deadlines, you set your timeline, you know you're going to be up against it. You could have a 12-week project, you still know you're going to be up against it at the death because of client delays, our delays, changes in scope, movements, whatever it may be. But as you say, with this, you've got the added complexity of you still need to incorporate a number of days or hours.
So many other things can be flexible. Do we need to deliver something a bit faster that's like a website? Let's throw another developer at it or work through the night if we have to.
Yeah.
The rendering process, we can't really do that much outside of, I guess, sending it to a firm to get it done faster.
And also, it's pretty reliable, but it can fall over, can't it? The rendering process.
Well, I think there's a lot of good videos out there if you go and look at where all these big movie companies have had anomalies in the coding when they've sent to render, and you've got like eyes popping out of sockets and things like that. And these are all things that can happen because I'm sure there's Studio Max users out there that will understand that one day you'll do something and it works fine. Like this morning I was building an island, so to speak, built it, extruded it up, it worked fine. Added a little swimming pool, so to speak, in the ground, a little cutout, wouldn't extrude up. No reason why. Deleted it all, rebuilt it exactly the same way, extruded it up, fine. And there is that, but in terms of the rendering is probably the scariest moment from my point of view, because I'm losing control. Yeah. I'm not in total control of everything, and that's quite scary to me anyway. But also, like you say, it's usually when you get to the render time, that's it. There's no way this can fail. You've got
been there a few times, haven't we?
It's got to work. Yeah. So you're constantly monitoring it and constantly checking it. And 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and check yeah, no, it's working, that's fine. And that's the scariest moment, because if you're at render time, which again, the reason we're hoping to negate that as much as possible, because that's why the process is in place. The whole process is in place to make sure that when we get to render point, well, yeah, we're happy that you've seen this.
Yeah.
Because what we'll do with a lot of stuff is send previous if it's animation, we'll send previous animations, pre-visualization animation.
Yeah.
It's the bare bones. It's not lit. It's not textured properly.
Yeah.
It's just the camera movement, so to speak.
Okay, so a quick question in relation to rendering. So one of the things we encountered when we started charging for CGI work was, do you charge for render time? So obviously when we're building quotes and budgets and so on for jobs, typically we have an hourly rate, a number of hours and some time associated with that, which builds our overall cost for that job. As a line item, if I was a client and saw rendering a number of hours next to it, or days as it may be in some cases, and not in considerable cost, because a lot of agencies are charging a full hourly rate for kind of that render time as well. What's your, I guess, response or take on that, or experience with that?
I think, yeah, it's an essential part of the process. If it's not done, the client doesn't get the final output. But also, it's I suppose it's like I say, if you buy a car, you pay for your wheels, the tyres, and we're paying for a piece of kit that's allowing this process to happen. Yeah. So other than that, you'd have to render it on your local machine, which then means that you can't work as effectively, because obviously it takes up all the processing power. So yeah, it should definitely be a case.
I think that, and when we talk about like the computer that we have internally to render, it's not the case of going out and buying £1,000 or €1,000 computer. It's something that costs closer to 10,000. And the whole time we're using it, as we mentioned previously, possibly in the previous episode, you're burning it out. That's not going to last forever. You're using some incredibly expensive hardware at full tilt for a continuous stretch of the time. On top of that, I don't know the exact number, but I believe the power consumption to run it at that is actually fairly considerable. Yeah. So it's if you leave a computer on idle, even if it's a powerful computer, it doesn't use that much power. But when it's running at full speed, it draws an awful lot more power, which is expensive.
Yeah, and like you say, these machines don't if it's a busy end and you've got 3 or 4 projects to deliver, these machines don't get time off. If you switch them off and switch them on to regenerate them, I suppose, like you do most PCs.
And the same mentality, I guess, around the render farms, like we touched on earlier. If you didn't have the capabilities to render in-house, which would be sort of semi-unusual maybe if you're trying to take CGI seriously as a business, but if you didn't, you'd be paying for that external cost of the render farm, which you'd therefore be charging on and probably marking up to a client either way. So one way or the other.
So render farm, obviously, they've got 40 odd PCs tied together, obviously many hundreds more in if it's a big farm. But like you said, there's an external cost associated with that. So at the moment we use effectively a mix. Typically render everything we can internally, don't we, Paul? But if it's something big, time consuming, or there's a really tight deadline, those render farms can come in handy.
Yeah, that's it. If we've got the time, we render it in-house. If we've not got the time, then we utilise the external.
But the other thing is, I guess, it's demand of projects. So it's a limited resource, just on the point of charging for it. It's a limited resource that only one project can effectively use at a time. Yeah. So, by using it for one client, we're denying that resource and that money making ability from many other clients as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for the clarification. I guess picking up some final points, I might be jumping around a little bit here, but in the sense of one of the things, again, we've almost learned the hard way, but we've been learning as we go, was in relation to ownership, I guess, like intellectual property around CGI and, let's say, models and assets and the various models that are developed. Obviously, when, I think in episode 1, we spoke around pre-built models and existing models and sites like Turbo Squid, and I'm sure there's many more that you could list off, where you can go on, you can type in modern building, it'll give you a pre-built model compatible with certain types of software that you can obviously use. If that pre-built model is then used within a project, who owns that? I know the answer because I've done a lot of research into it now, but I mean, from your perspective, how does it work as that, the creator?
In terms, well, from a creator's point of view, it's usually specified before the job's actually started. You get the video, you get the end product, but we've built that. That's our model. But I suppose it's a lot like like again, going back to the car analogy, it's, you can lease a car, or you can buy a car. The company that built the car doesn't own the car, so it's such a grey area that I think it does need to be stated at the start. Look, if you want complete ownership of this model, this entity, so to speak, this digital entity, then that's fine, but there is a cost.
I guess a couple of quick points to finish off. One of them would be in relation to the naysayers or doubters around CGI as an application within B2B. So I think when we spoke to clients, we spoke to prospects about CGI and the use of it, and there's often a lot of pushback because a lot of our clients' products are centered around a more sensorial experience, so more like the touch, taste, smell, picking things up, feeling the weight of things, the thickness, the transparency of films, as an example. There's all sorts of various tangible explanations. How do you combat that as a question for when you're saying, well, CGI could be an option, and they obviously instantly dismiss it because they don't think it's of relevance for them?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of points there that we've already looked to address with clients to think about solutions that can work hand in hand with CG. So in the case of food, for example, it could be a case of sending samples out to accompany what people are going to be seeing virtually. But the real thing I'd say is that it's not a fair comparison. We're not trying to replace your physical objects entirely with CG. We're really trying to fit CG in a place where the real isn't practical or isn't even possible in some cases. So it might be a more fair comparison to look at CG as a replacement to just showing product photography or brochures or videos of what your physical equipment might be or physical premises might look like, because you can create something that people are more free to explore, to look around, whether that's a 3D model on a computer that can be spun around, whether that's something that can be placed by putting your phone in a room and having an augmented reality model of a giant piece of equipment appear that obviously you couldn't take with you if you're visiting a customer. You couldn't practically take to an event with you, particularly not when we're thinking about sustainability and trying to look after the environment. And then there's also things like training and things like that you can do via VR. So create a 3D world that can be encompassed within a VR headset for training purposes, where it wouldn't be practical or even safe to put a real person in that kind of training scenario. So I think, Paul, you raised a point earlier about something, plants.
No, it's using the VR as an example there as well. It's used for a lot in football. There's a one company out there at the moment that are doing a lot of work that way. But it's also, which again, if you think you're coming back from an injury, there's non-contact, but you can still get your muscles, get those muscle repetition going back in. But it's also been really useful for the academies and people like that training, in terms of they can put them in situations and say, right, like Mo Salah on the wing, he got the ball, how did he see?
Yeah, where was the path of vision, so to speak?
This is his position. What did he see? Yeah. They sit the headset on and they can look around and see the exact positions of where other people are, and suddenly they can absorb that information that would have had to go through his head, and they're again training their head. But there's also,
it's actually seeing perspectives that you can't even see in the real world, I guess, isn't it? But I think it'd be interesting because I think the pandemic has obviously rapidly accelerated digital transformation, but it's also made the world that bit smaller again. So in the sense of, as Ollie said, if you can't get kit to somebody or you can't showcase products and services like you would have loved to previously at shows, then CGI is a great way to bring experiences, products and services to life, which actually is increasing your reach, arguably, in a way, rather than requiring on somebody to be physically in the company of the assets in discussion.
Well, you've also got, like I said, 3D printing. That's growing as an industry. More and more people are actually printing their own pieces of kit, mechanical stuff, and there's someone's actually adapted the 3D printed technologies to be building concrete houses in countries that couldn't really build concrete houses. So it's actually these people are building these models, sending them out. They've got a concrete 3D printer, so to speak, and creating these houses.
I don't know if we're there yet. Genuinely don't have a clue. But I can imagine we'll get to a point where you could be in a remote location, for example, and something breaks, and somebody sends you that file for a replacement part, and you don't have to worry about critical downtime in a plant or whatever it might be because you managed to replace that part.
I don't know whether it was an episode of Big Bang Theory. It could quite possibly have been, but I'm sure they've got a 3D printer on the International Space Station for that specific thing.
Yeah, you can imagine it though. I guess that ties into what was going to be my final question for this one, given we've gone over 2 parts. The future of CGI, the future of visual effects. I know we can go like Hollywood with this or more closer to home in a B2B kind of Marcoms environment, but it's so good already. I know over the years it's got better and better and better. I know you're an avid fan and a follower of this kind of stuff, but can it get much better?
I am an avid fan of CGI, but it's got to be used properly.
Yeah,
it's got to be done for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. That's the thing is the fact that there's a lot of stuff that can get churned out, but it's not for the reason that we can't physically do that or we can't not do that. The beauty of things like virtual visitor is the fact that you're giving clients full control of not just the environment. We're going to Rotterdam this year, we're going to Barcelona next year, they can go to an international space station if they want. They can go underwater if they want. And that's where it becomes a bigger selling point in my opinion in terms of, again, like I said before, where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
I think Matt raised that point as well. When it comes to getting the brief from the client, you've got to challenge why we're doing it. And I think the easiest example, at least from my point of view, is the old mobile app. I don't think it's happening so much anymore. But like 5 years ago, everybody just wanted an app for no reason. And if you don't have a good reason for doing something, and delivering a great customer experience alone can be a great reason. It doesn't need to be just because you're trying to get X number of leads or whatever it might be. But if you don't have a good reason for doing something, there's
I think it's beyond ego or it being cool or looking good. And that's one of the questions that I was going to mention earlier, and we won't finish on this now, but in terms of sometimes the design process can get ahead of it, you actually start losing the user experience or degrading that visitor experience for virtual visitors' perspective. So I think the purpose and the objective behind it is critical, but also very excited to see where it goes with this kind of limitless thinking and the new applications of where you're seeing it adding value across the globe.
Well, things don't have to be linear. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And you like I say, if you from a virtual visitor point of view, if you want to come to a reception, that is a reception. But then you want your meeting rooms to be underwater. Why not go for it?
Love it. Plenty of potential. Lots of exciting opportunities to come. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. Really interesting insights there in what's a new world for us, and hopefully shed some light for some of our listeners and viewers there of how CGI could play a part in your B2B Marcom strategy for 2021 and beyond. Thanks, Ollie. As I always close off, feel free to check out our knowledge, b2b.knowledge.com, our ungated content hub helping our clients, prospects and contacts navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.